Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy 2026, and welcome to the Restoring Our Roots podcast, the voice of the Decriminalize Nature Movement. This is actually season three, episode one. So, thank you for being here, Mackenzie, on that. Really excited to have two other seasons under our belts already, about 10 episodes per season. So, if you want to check us out, go to our podcasts and on Spotify and other places to see our past seasons. This podcast is a gathering space where we explore the wisdom of entheogenic plants and fungi, the healing, the beauty of natural healing, and the importance of reconnecting with the sacred earth. Twice a month, usually on Sundays, we'll hear from visionaries, healers, and advocates who are working with entheogenic plants and fungi, exploring realms of consciousness, and returning to us to a balanced relationship with nature. My name is Larry Norris. I'm the co founder of Decriminalize Nature and the national organizing director. In this role, I'm happy to help people out all across the US and other globally as well to pass policy to basically effectively decriminalize entheogenic or psychedelic plants and mushrooms on the local level. So we go through a whole process with the city council and we teach out how to do that. So if you're interested in getting some policy passed in your general region, give us a shout out at decriminalizenature.org or info@decriminalizenature.com, or excuse me, .org as well. If you, I would also like to introduce Rachel, who's our sort of behind the scenes whiz kid out there, helping us out with the production and everything. So, Rachel, thank you for all your help you're doing. She's responsible for putting this on the Spotify and also breaking this down into small chunks and getting this on the other platforms. The Sunday after this live show will happen on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. And then in the future episodes or future display, it'll be on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and other platforms such as that. So find us from there. If you'd like to make a donation to help the show out, please go ahead and do that. There'll be a link underneath the box here. You can go ahead and just click that link and give us a donation. We can help to continue this incredible movement growing. Also, for the live listeners, if there's anyone out there who has any questions or thoughts or insights into the conversation here, the last 10 minutes or so, we'll be doing some question and answers. So if you want to go ahead and put those in the chat box, Rachel will put those together and ask us towards the end of the show here. So pretty excited to hear what you have to say as well. Fantastic guest today. We have Mackenzie Darling, who is the founder of the Movement Makers and also host of a podcast I enjoyed having a nice little conversation with you on a little while ago called The Call to Rise. Really great. I've known Mackenzie for quite some time now. Always really appreciated your grounded approach to psychedelics and entheogens, your sort of interesting and view on perspective on leadership, which I think is really fantastic. We'll touch on that a little bit today, and your key insight on movements in general. Just kind of how you see the overall broad perspective here. So I'm really looking forward to switching roles and being the interviewer instead of the interviewee on this one, and finding out what Mackenzie has to say and sharing some of her wisdom today. So thank you for being here. How are you today, Mackenzie?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And thank you so much, Larry, for having me on the podcast. And it's such an honor to kick off season three and kind of switch spots with you since you were on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. So it's nice to kind of swap that wisdom and be in the other seat. So
Yeah.
excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was such a great conversation. It's sometimes you have these podcasts and you really just kind of click into a really nice conversation. I think the Call to Rise podcast we had did that really well. So thanks for that. So yeah, so before we start off, maybe if you want to just share a little background with the audience, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you found your way into this sort of area of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll try to keep it condensed here because it's quite a story. But my movement making really began about 10 to 15 years ago when I was brought into a NGO that was a documentary film company that wanted to bring me on to help distribute their films worldwide. And it was a small team with a grand vision. And so we came up with this campaign called Character Day, where once a year we would kind of put a stake in the sand and have people from all over the world watching their films, short films around how do you develop more character, humility, kindness, justice in the world, and then tie it all together within a global live stream where people would be hosting their own events throughout the world. And then coming back and kind of, being within the conversation of the live stream. And so within 3 years, I built that from a small concept to over 5 million people in 125 countries and built out a global ambassador program and brought on different partnerships such as U.S. embassies and Department of Education and different corporations around the world. And that was really my introduction to decentralized movement building. From there, I went and worked with a nonprofit organization doing anti-bullying campaigns with like ESPN and Major League Baseball. And after that, I kind of made a interesting swerve into the psychedelic renaissance, where I kind of found my dream job working with a psychedelic guide training school. And that really, opened my eyes into ancient wisdom and the wisdom of the plants, and really also had me start learning a lot about leadership and what does leadership mean, and what does the new earth leadership really look like. And from there, I went and I worked at a psychedelic church, and kind of built that with the founder from the ground up. And again, a lot of lessons around leadership, a lot of lessons around what do I value in leadership, what do I value in being in right relationship with the medicines and the institutions and how we're holding these sacred plants. And then, from there, I actually came to what I lovingly call my quantum crumble, where in 1 year I lost my job. I was having a massive health issues with chronic fatigue syndrome. I lost both of my parents within 5 months of one another. Like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And that really brought me into a 2 year container where I got really quiet. And what I really realized now was the void of the integration of everything that I had learned from so much ceremonial use. I also became an entheogenic minister, and was trained for 2 years and had been studying with the plants. And it wasn't until this moment that everything collapsed, that I actually collapsed within myself. And in that quiet, I returned to my ancestry. I started really connecting with my mother and my father on the other side that I had never been able to really connect with in this life, because unfortunately they hadn't done their own ancestral healing. And so it was up to me as the cycle breaker to walk that path of fire. And I then by becoming more connected to them, I then opened up a whole new connection to my larger ancestry and all of this support that had been there all along. And so that's a very, very long story, and trying to condense it into, a quick opener for us. But it really brought me to the threshold of building Movement Maker. And Movement Maker is this basically a movement architecture school. And what I like to call myself is a movement architect and an ancestral alchemist, because what I'm really doing is bringing those two things together. I think that our ancestry is one of the biggest missing pieces, actually, that isn't being talked about in leadership development. And also where we're at in culturally, like this really is an ancestral reckoning that we need to be looking at. And then bringing all of my background into decentralized movement building. What does that look like? Coupled with what does new leadership look like? And then coupled with ancestral healing really brings more of a holistic framework of movement building, of what we want to be building moving forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, there's so much there that I want to sort of unpack, but I think right now, it's so needed to, all the points you're touching on, both with character, what does leadership mean, how do we find our ancestors? So let's start off right at the very beginning, because you hear this a lot, especially right now in this quote unquote psychedelic renaissance of character challenges, or really people that are doing it well. What does character mean to you, and what are some ways that you can kind of develop it, and for people that are out there that are looking for facilitators or other people that can help them out, teachers, mentors, what have you, what things do you suggest that they look for in terms of character? What shows like a good character development?
Yeah. I've had a really interesting lens and worldview working behind all of these leaders of movement building. And so I've really I like to call myself the witness of how much are they living the values of what they're actually trying to bring into the world, right? And I think that's the biggest character. And I think also within movement building, that's why it's so important to get your values right, because if you're not being able to be in that relationship with integrity of, your public persona and your personal persona are not matching up, then eventually your community is going to be questioning those values. Or, like me, I actually went through, with one of my organizations, a huge crisis, like a sexual abuse scandal came, and happening in one of the psychedelic orgs that I worked with. And they brought in a crisis PR team. And we're trying to kind of, hide or, squelch what was happening. And it was me who said, hey, can we go onto our website and actually look at the values that are being brought, that we're trying to talk to people about? And one of them was, we do our shadow work, we walk our talk, right? And so I think that really is what I have seen has been probably the biggest missing piece. And I also, want to give people, we're human, we're not perfect, and so this is an ongoing thing that we try to step into and live our values, but to be more careful about what values are you promising people and how can you really step into them yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's it's sometimes it's a hard line to there's like your aspirations and then actually doing the
Exactly.
work. So I can see how in some scenarios it's a balance there, but it's so critical I think in terms of especially if you're going to be a leader of movements. Now another thing you were saying is kind of talking about what does leadership mean and what do you value in leadership for people that maybe have only heard of leadership in maybe an intellectual way but haven't actually embodied it or had the opportunity like you have to sort of step behind the scenes and be the witness. What does leadership mean to you outside of sort of living, walking your walk and that type of thing? And then sort of what values do you think make a good leader or good things for leaders to have or to cultivate?
Yeah. Leadership's an interesting thing because I think up until this moment, we've really been taught about the charismatic kind of guru leader. And that typically brings about more of the narcissistic leader, the one that's, comfortable kind of taking up more room, which really kind of takes all the air out of the room for women or people of color or empaths that have a harder time also systemically, that have been trained that they shouldn't take up so much space and so much room. And so really kind of looking at the new model of leadership, and what that means. So one is, I work with a lot of people now, training them and helping them step into their leadership. And first of all, a lot of these leaders are scared of stepping into leadership because they don't want to redo harm, because that's the only model that they've seen, right? Um, and this old power structure of power over, not power with. And I think this is why I'm so passionate about movement making, because in my eyes, I think that we actually should be done building businesses and only building movements, because a big part of movement building is co-creation. And so the new archetype of leadership is, how do you have the vision, but then how do you open that up to co-create and share power? And that takes a lot of humility. It's very rare to find a smart, driven, charismatic visionary that also has the humility and also has the capacity to be able to share their vision with other people, and also be able to let go of that control. Um, because that's what movement making is. And again, that goes back to character and what values are you putting out to the world, because that is your legacy. You start with the values and you don't really change those values. That is the movement, right? But it's then kind of letting go and also teaching people how to become better leaders. So you're the leader, but then you're training them to become their best selves. And I think that's what I'm so passionate about leadership, is because at the end of the day, you're just fanning the flames of people's brilliance and what they're here to do. And you're not the one that's in the spotlight. nor do you want to be in the spotlight. I think one of the things that was really interesting for me is so many of my psychedelic journeys were around what is my relationship to power and what is my relationship to leadership. And, you know, God, the divine, medicine, whatever you want to call it, like had a big calling for me, and I was terrified of it. It was asking a lot from me, and it was also asking for a lot of visibility. And, at one point I was like, I don't want this. Like, I'm super comfortable being the person behind the person doing everything. And the medicine was like, and that's the exact reason why you need to become a leader, because it's these people that are standing in the front that want that power, want that visibility, but it's people like you who have the ethics and a really great witnessing of what power actually looks like that need to be stepping into more power and more leadership.
I mean, I think you touched on such an interesting point there too. This strange bifurcation that happens with you have a group of people that all have psychedelic experiences, and some of them become the sort of narcissistic psychedelic leader, and other of them become so humble that they don't want to really engage with that process. What do you think that is about? I mean, we talk about like all these benefits of psychedelics, but also there's these moments where like narcissism can get enhanced, and some people take on these roles of power. What do you think that element is, and how do when you share with people or when you talk to people about this, how do you help them ground if they do have this really big ego expanding experience to realizing, okay, what am I here to do actually is to build a movement, not to build myself?
Oh, Larry, this is such a rich question, because I think, you hear this all the time where people are like, "Oh, if everyone just did psychedelics, like the world would be a better place. Like let's get Trump and Putin and all these people in the room and have them do psychedelics and like it'll be world peace." But you and I know that all psychedelics are amplifiers, right? So first of all, they're going to amplify the ego, and I think that everyone, when they're introduced to psychedelics, their ego can get very easily amplified. I think a lot of people go through that messiah complex. I know I certainly did. But, it's with that relationship with yourself and with the medicine that you start kind of parsing out, oh, we're all interconnected. Oh, like, the medicine isn't actually telling me that I'm Jesus Christ. It's actually pointing to Christ consciousness, and we're all, Christ consciousness. I mean, that literally happened to me at my graduation weekend of my entheogenic minister training. Jesus and Martin Luther King came to me and, were showing me that, bringing me to like this river where people were drowning, and people, were saving them individually, one on one. And the medicine brought me up to the dam to show me that I, was more needed systemically. Like, let's go up to the dam and see, how we can fix the root problem of why people are right. And if I hadn't had more discernment around and training and integration, and also kind of going back to that humility, I would have been like, oh, I'm the next Jesus Christ, I'm the next Martin Luther King. Like, it's very easy for me to be like, I'm building movement maker and look at me, like, let's this savior complex. But really it was just pointing to, I think, this moment in time, what is needed, and bringing those types of archetypes in as kind of your milk lines, as I like to call them, in ancestral healing work, which is like, what are your archetypes and your rooted foundations that you can pull from to learn from how they you know grew and moved movements.
And I think the whole idea that I like what you're saying there. You could do the individual sort of saving one person at a time, or sort of look at this bigger system. And I think it even in the terms of the psychedelic experience or the entheogenic experience, you have this. If you're the savior, then how do you have the mystery? It's like you lose out. You can't participate in the mystery anymore, right? And that's for me the joy of really participating in these experiences is like, wow, the wonder, the awe, the connection, like you're saying, the realization of like, yeah, while we are divine, but also at the same time we're doing our own individual roles, whatever that might be, and what's coming next we don't know. And so I think when we put ourselves too far on the front, we start to forget that we're all part of this mystery, and we stop asking the questions. And I think probably a big part of psychedelic experiences is curiosity. Like once you get to the point where you can be like curious and continually be curious, then you're always finding new questions to ask. You're always finding things that are interesting. You're always finding new ways to go about things. And as you mentioned earlier, and maybe you can touch a little bit on this next, about this sort of new world that's we're coming into this new space. Things are changing quickly, whether it's AI and technology or other things going on or global dysfunction or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of things happening right now. Psychedelic renaissance as well, or maybe even that term, is a little bit loaded, but this sort of destigmatization that people are having around psychedelics. So we're moving into this new space and time where it's going to require new understandings of the world, new understandings of how do we think, how do we take in information, how do we ground stuff that is the mystery, how do we connect with these spiritual experiences in a world that's all about measurement. Explain to maybe the audience, what is this new world you see coming in? How do you see moving forward, sort of some of the dynamics that will be helpful in this sort of reemergence?
Yeah. I think one of the two biggest things that this new world is asking from us is how to hold more capacity and complexity. Because in this paradigm that we've been in, it's been very black and white. This is how the world is. This is how it operates. And now, I think, and it's been the prophecy, the eagle and the condor, of bringing ancient wisdom and modern strategy together. And so it's exciting to be like, wow, I don't think, and we kind of glorify this like technology or this modern world where we vilify it, and it's the same thing with like ancient wisdom, right? And we're kind of looking at ancient wisdom as the savior, like, oh, this is the answer. But it's actually, if you bring these two together, I think that's really what makes the whole. And we're at this incredible spiritual moment, because truly I believe, at the root of a lot of spiritual teachings is the culmination and the balance of the feminine, the masculine. And we've been, in this modern world going a million miles per hour within this masculine energy, and it's burning us out. We don't feel like we belong. We're all hyper individualized. And now, with bringing in the feminine and the ancient wisdom and the return to the sacred, it's really balancing those two energies. And I don't think that it's a mistake that during this time, the rise of psychedelics and the rise of AI are coming together at the same time. We're really being asked to raise our consciousness, and the people, especially, I feel so blessed to live in San Francisco on the West Coast, where what an exciting time. Like, we're literally living in the epicenter of consciousness right now. And when I go in the Midwest and things, like my brother-in-law, I love it. He always explains to his friends, like, oh yeah, my sister-in-law who lives on the West Coast, she's living quite a bohemian life. And I just laugh, because it's like, that's kind of how it's seen. But I think that really what the revolution is this remembrance. It's this return to source and to the sacred and to one another and belonging and community, which will really reconnect us to our human experience. And at the same time, um, using this technology and ways of dreaming together, I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, especially, how people view what's going on here. Whether it's like really, really, especially in San Francisco, it's really like negative, like, oh, it's everything's going to the horrible spaces, blah blah, or like, wow, what's happening out there, right? But there is something going on here, and maybe you do need that balance of both of those sides happening, so that we just don't sort of fly away with sort of ideas and things like that. Now, earlier you were talking a little bit about and you spoke to this a moment ago too, about ancient wisdom and these ideas that have been around for a really long time, and remembrance. You spoke a little bit about sort of going on your own journey to sort of understand your own ancestral past and that type of thing. A lot of folks out there maybe don't have either connection to their ancestors or didn't even know how to start that journey. Do you have any, I mean, both from what you did, it sounds like maybe you have a little bit more of a connection to some of your past, but from your perspective, or from people that don't have connections to their past, how do you suggest to start that journey for folks, to start to explore? Is it, maybe in dreams and other things like that? Is it more the sort of genealogy type stuff? More sort of lore. I know for my ancestry is from Finland. Started to look into some of the sort of the wisdom of the lore and the bardic tradition and some of the old sort of poets, and you started realizing, wow, there's a whole magic tradition here that nobody really talks about, but you got to go sort of find your way. So, do you have any suggestions for folks, and how did that work for you in terms of your ancestral discovery?
Yeah, it was such a journey. The pathway that really opened for me was, first of all, both of my parents passing away at in such quick intervals with one another, and really like alchemizing that relationship first was very helpful for me personally on my journey. So I started like doing little exercises with them. I mean, the smallest one was like on my mother's birthday, I always like I have an ancestral altar. So I would highly, highly recommend that and kind of have a practice of visiting that every day. But like on her birthday or the day that she died, I actually sit and I channel a letter from her to me every year. And then I put it on my altar, and it's kind of this like living prayer between her and I. And then I go out and I have food that, Chinese food was her favorite food. And so I have that on the day that she passed, her death day, but I call it our rebirth day. And that really kind of opened up another opening where then I started talking and communing with my grandfather, who we actually share a birth name. And he was this like big, and he built empires, and he was like a major entrepreneur and incredibly powerful, and just had so much to teach me. And so I started sitting at the altar and just asking him questions. And there was one question that I asked him that was like, Grandpa, what do I need to know about like building money? Because one of our ancestral stories is poverty. We go from, extreme wealth to poverty to extreme wealth. And it's one of these, flows throughout our generational line. And it came so quickly where the answer was, you need to believe that money is easy to make. And it was this like, whoa, like light bulb moment, because I had this belief, this core belief that was like running my life, that I thought money was difficult to make because of this line of ancestral poverty that had been coming in throughout, my line. And I had learned that because of going to like 23andMe and getting that, genealogy and kind of tracking all of our patterns and themes. So yes, like I would definitely start there and be able to pinpoint like, okay, where do my people come from? What are the lands that they come from? What are the patterns? Do you see, war, famine, migration, all these things? But then going, a deeper level, if you can, I can't like tell our listeners enough. If you have the opportunity and you're close to your family now, please, 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 please go and sit down and grab that lineage. Um, I unfortunately, lost a lot of that story, but I did go back to my half sisters, and like they shared with me the songs that our great great grandparents listened to, and the recipes that they had and all of these things. And it's incredible because once a week I created like an ancestral playlist of my family, and I play that ancestral playlist, and like they're friggin' right here with me. Like it music can tap you into that source so quickly with them. Same with food. Like you make a dish of a casserole that your great grandmother made, and like she's right there with you, right? Um, and other ways, I found that my maternal line came from Scandinavia, Norway. And so I went really, really deep into um, my lineage there. And I think this is so, so, so important for especially like Western people like us. We keep going down to, and kind of extracting from Shipibo tribes and Mazatec and all of these people that have been staying true to their lineage and true to the medicine of their people. But we too have that same medicine within our line, right? And so going back and kind of finding that, the Viking women were actually like medicine women and herbalists. And so I started, working with my dreams and even taking mugwort at night, which was one of their herbs to connect with their ancestors. And yes, like my ancestors were actually coming to me and speaking to me and having a deeper connection with them. I mean, obviously, like I'm so grateful that I found psychedelics as well, because that is a huge portal into ancestral knowledge. And, it's such a sad thing in our culture right now that like I actually had it was funny. I was in Guatemala at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about my work, and someone said, huh, that's really surprising that like you're into ancestry work because you seem so grounded and like not very woo. And I was like, oh, wow, that is so interesting that people look at ancestral work as like this woo out there thing, where even, science is kept catching up with epigenetics and like, actually, yes, our stories live in our very cells. So we think that our ancestors have gone so far, but really they're just right here with us. And I think the beauty actually um, that I got by losing both of my parents, like I did, really had me re examine death and the veil, and actually realizing that many times death actually brings people closer than they were in real life, and examining those relationships because they don't necessarily have to be right here, because they're always right here in your heart and in your cells and who you are.
Yeah, I mean that's such a beautiful story and journey I think that I'm hearing from you here. And also just again, just sort of tap into what you're saying there, how interesting is that looking at the people who brought you here today, meaning your ancestors, that you're a component of thousands and thousands and thousands of people to be here today, and that's considered woo or somehow not worth looking into, but it's so critical to who we are as a human being, you know. It's weird these mindsets that we have, you know, these different perspectives, these worldviews that sit in this, and maybe because the ideas of how do you explore these elements are more liminal or more you can't sort of like measure it and doing like a letter from your mom or whatever, and that's something that like channeling that is like you have this sort of Jung talked about this active imagination where you do sort of writing back and forth, and like what can you tap into, especially when that person is in your genes basically, and I really loved how you're talking about music and recipes. What a great way. I mean, we even hear this with psychedelic experiences where sometimes finding the music that you're listening to during the journey will help you remember something. But like hearing a music piece that somebody's listened to many, many years ago, or an old, sort of for my child, these old bardic traditional songs, that your ancestors were listening to like centuries and centuries ago, that literally really drops you into a different space and time. And even more so because I know that my grandma used to make this really great sort of it's called nisua. It's like this sort of cardamom bread, sweet bread that I make in Finland, and like even the process of kneading the dough, and like getting the, it takes a while. Like unless you have like a little bread machine, it takes a lot of, and so you're feeling it, and you just think about my grandma who's an older woman, and she was just kneading that bread and making it work, and you kind of tap in to these sort of these sensations that your grandma was going through and the flavors that was brought to the table. Like, how beautiful is that? And so I think, you tap into some really interesting ideas around exploring ancestry of just like getting the music and the food that they're eating, having those recipes. Make sure you share those recipes, keep those recipes, written down, keep them flowing, to other relatives as well, because that is a deep connection to the place, the people, the food, the ideas, the consciousness that exists with your ancestry. So yeah, so thank you for that. That was really beautiful. I know you're talking through that process too about making an altar for ancestry or in general. For those folks out there that maybe not too familiar with how to make an altar, is there any kind of suggestions you have in terms of like good ideas around how to build an altar, things to consider? How big does it need to be or how small? Just maybe tell some folks a little bit about altar making, if you will.
Sure. Um, yeah, it's interesting. So my first module within the first day of my movement maker incubator that I created is all around connection to source, and I actually have them build a movement altar, um, and bring their ancestors onto that altar. And the altar that I use was from my grandmother. And I have, the pictures from both of my maternal and paternal lines on there. And I also have my milk lines, which mentioned before. So these are people that you're not biologically related to, but they are people that you are emotionally and spiritually, and they're like your teachers that are here to help connect you to your purpose or your cause. And so I have like Martin Luther King on there, and I do have Jesus on there, and I do have Glennon Doyle's book Untamed on there, because she's one of my rock stars in this life. And then I have, different elements from the earth. So I bring in the various elements that symbolize as within, so without, and kind of, ground the altar. I have a journal there, and that's really, really powerful, because as I'm sitting there, and I always light a candle, and then I thank them. And the thing about ancestral work is that it's just relational work. You're building a relationship. And so people, when they think of like ancestral work, they think of 23andMe, and they think of, oh, where am I from? Da 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 da. But it's actually like, how does it show up in your intuition? What's coming through you at that altar somatically? Like, is my, chest tight when I think about my great great grandfather? Or where does my mother live within my own soma? And so I think that's just important to be visiting your ancestral altar, if nothing else, to feel into your somatic and your intuitive experience of what lives there currently. And then, I bring an offering to them every day. My grandfather, who, as I mentioned, I work with a lot within my own movement building, he loved like radishes and cucumbers. And that was something that I learned from going back and asking my family, like, okay, what did grandpa eat? And so every day I'd bring him a little bit of, cucumbers and radish, and thank him for bringing me to life, right? I mean, because as you said, there's thousands of people standing right behind us that brought us here. I mean, it's truly a crazy that we made it here. And also, how resilient those ancestors of ours were. You have to look at the gifts and the wounds. And most of us come from harm because of our ancestors being needing to be in so much survival up until now. And I think that's something else to really consider, is that what I like to say is that our ancestors have built the foundation, but we in this moment are here to build the cathedral. Like, we have the opportunity right now, because we have more resources, we have more safety, to actually think about building something new, which I think is really exciting.
And as you're saying, talking about ancestors, and we probably all know how cats are familiar. You have your cats doing zoomies in the background there.
Right? Exactly.
The
I
ancestors
knew I was, I was,
right now.
I was gonna say, I'm like, they're gonna be a part of this podcast because they always are. But yeah, they're doing zoomies. They're with the ancestors right now.
For some folks out there, I mean, and maybe just speak to this. How relevant are your pets when you do your journey at home, and are they part of that? And how, I know some people, they're sort of, don't really think about it that much, but other ones, I've seen cats that are just like, or dogs too, that are just like, they'll just tune in to the person that's having that journey. How does the pet interaction and relational stuff work there as well?
Oh my God, I love this question so much, Larry. So I'm an entheogenic minister, and people come to my place, and we do ceremonies here, and I kind of joke that like it's really cat ministry. Because most of the time, so my one cat, this, and it's crazy, right? Because it when I'm being a minister, I can like feel in my own body when the medicine is coming up from the person taking the medicine. And the moment that I can feel it in my own body, my one cat will like run out of the room. So I'm like, okay, he's not a medicine cat. And the other cat will like jump onto the person and then just lay there the entire time, like so tapped in. But I have to tell this one amazing story. So I was doing a mushroom journey by myself, like during COVID, and I was having a really, really hard time at one point. And I thought to myself, oh, he's going crazy right now. I thought to myself, oh, like I really wish Dulce LaRue was in the room with me. All of a sudden, Dulce comes sprinting in, jumps on my chest, and he just lays on my chest and he's just like staring at me. And him and I are staring at each other for, I swear to God, it felt like 10 minutes. And then telepathically, he said to me, welcome. This is my reality 100% of the time. Pure presence and pure love. And it just blew my mind. Like, we as humans think that we are on this like hierarchical superiority, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get where they are the whole time. So it was just such a beautiful moment.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know. And I mean, how do they tap in? That's the thing that I'm always like, that you mentioned there. They hear, they know, they just there's something they vibe on it right away, and they can tell. They didn't see us necessarily eat anything, but all of a sudden they're there and they're present in a different way than they ever have been before. So I think that's really fascinating, this connection. And you hear a lot about cats and in emergency rooms and things like that, or like in medical places where they can tell when somebody's getting to that liminal space, and we'll go sit by them and sort of comfort them through that process. So yeah, I think that the wisdom of the animals is something that we should definitely be keeping aware of as we're sort of exploring these deep experiences as well.
Amen. And I've been thinking about that actually recently of how the Egyptians, used to completely revere cats. And so
Mhm.
there's a reason for that.
Right, right. And there's even I was recently I believe Freya, right? Freya also was also connected to cannabis, but also had a lot of cat sort of characters, and that's I think Norwegian or Viking background as well.
Yes,
So that's kind of in
absolutely.
your ancestry, right? Yeah. So yeah.
I actually really, really laughed when I found Freya because of the cats. I was like, oh, okay, so this is where my cat lady obsession comes from.
Right, right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So you're kind of working on, you've done all these wonderful projects, you're working with Ancestry, you're working with all these other types of things, kind of build, yourself in this process, and you're also working on building sort of movements or helping people build movements. When you're looking at a movement in general, whether it be a psychedelic movement or other types of movements, what are some different things that you think, and maybe some hints that you've gotten from the psychedelic realm to help people with the movement building process?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's like three major components to movement building, which a lot of people skip the first part. So the first part, I think, is building a foundation, and that's the building the foundation within yourself. So that is the ancestral healing part. And what is your relationship to power? What is your relationship to source? I think that is like I did a focus group for my movement maker incubator, and that was actually one of the biggest takeaways people were sending to me. Like, man, I wish you could like take this incubator and bring it to Silicon Valley because you could literally change the world, right? So reconnecting us to source and also stewardship and getting really, uh, really in right relationship with that stewardship and not being so ego driven, and then moving into community building, and what does creating a strong ethical community mean, and then lastly is mobilization, so building the campaign and building, and I really like to talk about like movement marketing because marketing gets a bad rep for a good reason. It's icky. But when you're doing movements, it's more about storytelling. It's more around resonance. It's more around, you're not looking at like the demographics of, okay, where does this person live and da 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 da. You're looking at like, all right, what is their sacred rage? What is their longing? What is their hope? And you're giving people something to step into. I mean, Martin Luther King, he was so incredible for so many different reasons, but he didn't start with, okay, I have a plan. He started with, I have a dream. He gave us something to step into and to believe in that then brought people to co create in. And so I think it's a really, within movement building, I think, at least in my program, it's important to have both the inner and the outer architecture of what you're building, because I've seen it over and over and over again, unprocessed trauma with people that have had all the right intentions at heart, and they've done a lot of their healing work, but they haven't done their healing work within a leadership role, right? Like, I've done so much healing work, and I thought I was like good to go. And then the second I stepped into, oh, I'm gonna now lead my own movement, all of my shit came up, right? All of my shit came up. My visibility wounds, my scarcity wounds, my overgiving, my people pleasing. Woo! Um, and so, yeah, really, and it's interesting because I've done a lot of market research on, okay, what's out there in terms of movement, incubators and programs, and nothing really brings those two together. There's a lot that have, like, okay, this is how to, here's the architecture and the structures, the modern strategy of how to build a movement. Most of them are building businesses, and here's the ads and the funnels and the click-through rates and da 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 da. And then, or it's leadership development, but it's leadership development from a very status quo level. And I truly think, if we're going to make it through this next phase, we need to start looking at it from a much more higher perspective and holistic perspective.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And if you were to sort of look forward and the perfect, I don't know, utopian gets a lot of like bad rep, especially around psychedelics right now, but if the perfect utopian psychedelic, end result or where we're going towards, how do you see, if you were to sort of say like, okay, here's the fantasy realm, here's the dream, that we're looking for psychedelics or entheogens, what does that look like for you in the future?
With psychedelics in particular.
Yeah, I mean psychedelics and culture, how we sort of, address it and how do we move forward and what types of things should we cultivate and then all that kind of thing.
Mm. It's interesting. So I have just landed at Sacred Garden Community Church in Oakland, and I'm going through their ordination program. And I think they're the first organization that I am seeing that's doing this work right. And it took me a long time to join the program because I had been really, I've seen too much shadow within the psychedelic space, and psychedelic leadership, and I was very cautious. But what they're doing is they're turning ceremonial work into community work. And that's one of my biggest things, is like, we have really westernized and individualized and privatized psychedelic work. And it's so westernized to think like, okay, let's spend $3,000 on a ceremony and have the privilege just keep getting better, while people that aren't as privileged keep getting worse. And so my view is, and my dream is that we finally realize that we are all one, and that we need collective liberation to actually step into a new reality, or we're just going to keep perpetuating the same problems. And so I think, first of all, creating places and networks where we're getting people resourced enough, and set up enough to then be able to sit within community and begin integrating within community, because that's something that we're really not realizing, is paying a coach like all this money to integrate when you're sitting in your room in your apartment by yourself integrating, and not actually being within community, where that really, that's when your biggest wounds are going to get kicked up, and that's the pedal to the metal of like, how am I changing things? So that's the first one, is like privatization versus like, let's start healing in community, and accessibility. And that actually, I think, goes hand in hand, because when you're bringing it into a communal container, then people that are more privileged can then help support the ones that are not. And so I think that's my answer for now. I can probably think of some other ones, but I'm excited to see what Sacred Garden is up to. Um, and also, another thing that I really enjoy about Sacred Garden is their knowledge of the plants. I've been in a lot of different organizations that have felt more extractive, of like, oh, well, this is the ceremony that we do because we took it from, another lineage, and we're just kind of like, um, doing the pattern and doing, the thing that we're supposed to, but it's not actually connecting with the plants, knowing what the plants, um, you know, different strands are, and what their different consciousness is, and things like that. So really reconnecting with nature.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's both of those things, both the community and the connection with plants, I think are key. Watching a plant grow, we can learn so much from that, and that's again building relationship. That's a different type of community, right? We talked about the vertical community, which is ancestral work. We have a horizontal community, which is like the people and our peers, but we also have our non-human community, right?
I
The
love that,
that we talk
Larry.
about, the plants that we talk about, all these mushrooms that are happening. How do they grow? What does it look like? What types of things does it like or not like? And then how does that reflect in our inner experience and that type of thing? So I think, looking at this sort of sphere of community where we're not talking about just horizontal or vertical, but also all these other elements that we're sort of engaging with, even ourselves, as part of our community, but in not in like this individualistic kind of way that you're speaking about, hyper individualistic, but how that then relates to others, I think is really, really key. So that's important. We always ask this question to all the guests, so I want to throw this out there before we go to our last couple minutes with Rachel, asking a question here. But um, the question we always ask is, when you hear the words decriminalize nature, what does that mean to you?
Mm. Well, you and I had our interview on the Call to Rise, my podcast, a couple of weeks ago. And, as a movement maker, I love that you made you made the distinction that like movements should have, in a name, people questioning it, right? Like from the get go. And so it is that name that's like, wait a minute, why is nature criminalized? And it has people really questioning the authority, right? And so decriminalizing nature, I think, just automatically has my revolutionary kind of being like, wait a minute, like, yeah, I need to fight for my rights of my right to connect with nature. And who has the right to tell me my relationship to nature? And so it both brings this like love for nature and my God given right to connect with it. And then also has me start thinking about the containers and the laws and my rights more. And so I also think that it brings us back to the right relationship of how we're supposed to be with these plants. I'm in your boat. Like, I don't think that this should be, you know, legalized and then put so many different like processes and bills and laws and da da da. It's like, no, this is nature, and everyone has their own right and their own relationship to be with it.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Mackenzie. Appreciate that. Yeah, throw it over to Rachel now. Rachel has a comment and a question.
Ooh, that was such a great conversation. What you said about ancestral alchemy like hit me in my soul. I have just come from my granny just turned 100 years old in December, so it was actually during Christmas holidays. We're having a big 100, like multiple celebrations with her and her friends, and so it was just really nice to get what you were saying about just the stories, like falling in love with your own origin story, just going back to your like the stories of like what made you you, right? So that was just one comment. My question is along the lines of like character and developing character, just because my other life, I read comic books and cosplay, so I've read a lot of comic books. And there's a saying from uh, Watchmen where Dr. Manhattan, when he chooses to help save the world, it's because he realizes that each individual human being is a thermodynamic miracle, right? The concept of like this man, this woman fell in love, and like survival as a whole in this in this 3D reality, and all of this came together so that you, only you, uniquely you, would be here, right now. And the miracle of what that is, we've forgotten about because there's so many miracles, right? We forget how special it really is. So my question to you is, in terms of characters, fictional, non-fictional, your own, do you have a favorite character type?
Favorite character type.
Yeah. You know, like I have a thing for like the what do you call it? The lone hero who goes off on his own, who like has to go like into the wilderness, or like the renegade or the rebel, right? Or the one who's like the Boy Scout leader who always makes the right decisions, or
Yeah.
the one who's like a bit more the wild card. Like it's just funny. These are just different character types. There's no right or wrong way of how to
Yeah, yeah,
approach
yeah.
life. But like, do you have a favorite type?
Yeah, I definitely always do like the rebel,
Me too.
the one that like goes against the grain and like fights for the rights of their people. It's funny that you bring this up actually because kind of on topic, kind of off topic. I created this 7 archetypes movement maker quiz.
Oh,
Like the 7 archetypes that are here to quote unquote save the world, right? And so I actually wrote them down here so I wouldn't forget in case this came up. So the first one are the mystics, right? These are the people that come in and are connected to the unseen world and are reminding us, what is sacred. But they oftentimes can feel too ethereal and they need to like be brought back down to earth to really be able to connect with their audience. The
the
next are
wizards.
creative. The what?
The wizards living on
The
top of a mountain.
wizards, exactly, exactly. I love that. Then there's the creative visionaries who have like a million different ideas, but they really kind of need to get more focused and more like tunnel vision. Then we have the bridge walkers. This is like Dalai Lama, who, has kind of been kicked out of their own society or never really belonged, but their gift is that they can really see a larger lens, a larger periphery, right? Then we have the systems disruptors who are able to really see like under the hood and be able to build new systems and new architecture. But a lot of times they can just be in their head and it's very hard for people to get like connected to their vision. Then we have the alchemists, which is probably the one that I resonate with most, is the people that turn their pain into purpose. And these are the ones that are like ending and beginning their new ancestral story. And then the last are the tricksters. These are the funny ones like the Jean Caberts that like come and use humor to really start a revolution. So I think it's exciting to think about archetypes. And, I also am an Enneagram coach. And that's an archetypal, system as well. And I think that's really powerful to think archetypally when you're building new worlds.
Love that so much. Thanks for that. Back to you,
Yeah, thank
Larry.
you.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Mackenzie, for all this. It's been quite a wonderful conversation. Are there any last things that we didn't cover that you want to jump on and maybe just mention for the audience?
I don't think so. I'm just really, really grateful to have such an enriching conversation. I always enjoy our time together, Larry. Would love for any of the movement makers, revolutionaries, people here that are ready to step into sacred and servant leadership and this new model. I would love for you to connect with me. My website is globalmovementmaker.com. I'm also getting my Instagram up and running, which is global_movement_maker. I have the Call to Rise podcast where I'm interviewing all these different amazing change makers and movement makers. If you're interested in being on my podcast and you're doing badass stuff, definitely hit me up. And then you can take that quiz, quiz.globalmovementmaker.com to see what your, archetypal pattern is. And I'm also going to be hosting one of my first movement maker incubators, I think late February. So if this sounds interesting, would love to connect with people.
And is that online or is that in person?
That this one in the end of February will be online, and then I am hoping to also do in-person retreats together because I think it's super yummy to bring people, especially in this AI tech-forward world, together and circle together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, wonderful. So if anyone wants to, and then your contact information's on your website as well. So if they want to like get a hold of you, do an email or whatever.
Yeah, I have like a book a discovery call, so people can book time with me there.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mackenzie. What a pleasure to chat with you. I always enjoy this, and it's fun to go in kind of all the different directions and always land in the kind of touching on all the topics we want to touch about anyway at the end. So it's been really a pleasure. Reminder for everybody out there that we are going live every 2 weeks, so depending on scheduling, but I think from now until the end of May, we have an every other Sunday situation going on there. You can find us live on YouTube, Rumble, or Odyssey. And then next week, Rachel will be putting this on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and other platforms as well. So check us out there. Um, our next show will be on January 25th, and this is with Gwen Pelfini, who is out of San Francisco. She does a lot of psychedelic integration work and works with some other healing modalities as well. So if you haven't already, give us a subscribe, check us out, get updated on what's coming up next. And we're looking up, as I mentioned, a pretty good lineup of speakers all the way till about middle of May right now. So we're pretty excited that they just keep coming, and everyone wants to have a great conversation. And thank you, Mackenzie, for being episode 1, season 3. We hope to
Woo!
have many, many more seasons ahead as well. And then reminder again that this will be up on Spotify next week with Mackenzie. So thank you for listening in, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mackenzie and Rachel, for the conversation. Remember, everybody, until next time, tune in, stay rooted, and let's grow together. Happy Sunday. Happy 2026.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.